happy holidays, Merry Christmas to everybody, and Happy New Year for those
Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
For those of you who celebrate. So I hope you're all having a great time. And so we decided that today's episode was going to be a little bit different. So to start off with, I'm Cam.
And I'm Jake.
And we have issues.
Yeah.
So we went back to front there, but I mean, hey, it works. So yeah, today's episode is going to be our issue as such is a little bit different. We're going to go through some recent pickups, and what we mean by pickups is a little bit different to what sort of the comic YouTube community might be familiar with. We're not talking about books that we necessarily bought recently, but books that we've read recently, so picked up off the shelf maybe.
Or rediscovered out of a box.
Absolutely, yeah. So literally it's anything that has been read recently by us. And that's what we're calling pickups from this day hence, or this day
Or
forward.
actually, it's going to be something that we may have read before and we haven't read for a long time, and we suddenly discovered it again and picked it up, and we're going to read it.
Yeah, exactly. It could be any one of those things. So they're just recent stuff. So Jake, I'm going to give you the floor to start off with. So what's your first pickup?
All right. So the first pickup is actually a doozy of a pickup here. So this is my collection of the original issues, and this is why it's called Jake and Cam Have Issues. It's because they're the original issues of Elektra Assassin.
Oh, nice.
And these are, I collected these. I started collecting these when they came out on the newsstands in Walden Books. Not all of them at the same time. I think I started with issue number 3. Can
I interrupt you? When you say Walden Books, tell me about what is Walden Books? Is it sort of a comic chain, or what is it? Local store?
If you've ever seen like 80s retro movies, like especially ones that you kind of like, for example, there's a clip in like the Wonder Woman movie from Wonder Woman 84 where she's in a mall.
I need to see
and that's
that.
Like the quintessential 80s mall where there are different types of shops that was in every American mall, and Walden Books was one of them. Walden Books was a chain of bookstores that was in every American mall.
Okay.
And they had a pretty good selection, and they carried magazines and comic books in the front of the store.
Okay. So kind of like a Borders then.
Yeah, it predates Borders. Like basically before the big chain bookstores came about, like the bookstores in the United States were essentially in malls from my childhood anyway. And then they were also like on the main streets and things like that. But many children who would have grown up in suburbia will know Walden Books and B. Dalton booksellers. Yeah. And of course, I used to work in a Walden Books and a B. Dalton booksellers.
Oh yeah,
that's one of my first jobs in the United States.
So not to digress, did they have quite a large comic book section, or was it?
Oh, they had like a comic book rack. So the things that you would have, and you'll see this in other people's podcasts and things like that mentioned, or as a visual prop, you would go into like a Walden Books, a B. Dalton, or a 7-Eleven, a convenience store, and you would either have the regular magazine racks where you would have magazines and comic books on one of the shelves, or you would have a rotating shelf of comic books. Usually it's like a 4-story shelf with like a single comic book each that rotates the 4 sides. So you would have maybe 16 different covers that would be shown. Man, that's something that's a nostalgia trip right there.
Okay, so tell me about the run. So who's it by?
So this one is by Frank Miller and Bill Sienkiewicz.
Oh, no way.
Um,
Frank Miller did an Electra run. I didn't know that.
oh
This is
yeah,
news to me.
this is way famous. Like this
Okay.
is essentially the character proved so popular in the 80s that they Marvel decided to release it as part of their Epic line, which is that big E on the top corner there. And Bill Sienkiewicz was a hot artist at Marvel. He was doing like I think the New Mutants, and they tapped Frank Miller, of course, who is famous for his run of Daredevil and Elektra in it. And this is absolutely nutty as a series. Um, Here's the covers to the series in
Is that
numerical
the
order.
complete run?
Yeah, this is the complete run, 8 issues. This is the one that I started with. This is the one that I got at Walden Books. And these are properly backed too. Like I don't usually have backing boards, do I? And you could see Bill Sienkiewicz's really awesome painted art style.
Oh man, that looks amazing.
Right? And the book is full of illustrations like this. It's painted throughout the book. And if we ever cover other things that he's done, a lot of the things that he would have done are inked. And so this is really like quite a work. And I don't want to get too much into it because it's just pickups, but just to kind of show you the individual issues.
Yeah.
This guy is the antagonist of the piece, and if you read it, you'll be like, wait, they actually made the T-1000 and put it into comic book form years before Terminator 2. This guy.
Okay.
So really totally a great.
I love that cover. The one you've got in front of me right now.
Well, this has been redone so many times as a homage to this to this.
Yeah.
Well, to the cover, it's been redone, and this series is itself very much an important part of Marvel's legacy in the 80s. It not only is Elektra, but it's part of their Epic imprint, which is supposed to be their imprint for mature readers.
Nice. So for a new reader, do you need to know a lot about Elektra to get into that particular
not
run?
Not at all. I mean, it's very much standalone. It doesn't go at all into like what she did in Daredevil.
Okay.
You could pick that up and totally just get right into it. Like it's a great read. It's also very much totally psychedelic. You're just like, whoa, this is.
Wait, why is it psychedelic? Sometimes that's a red flag for me because the most psychedelic comic book I've ever read is The Incal by Jodorowsky and Mobius, and that's about the most psychedelic thing I've ever read, and it's great. I love it. I have it in my collection, but there's only so much of that I can handle. What do you mean by psychedelia in this? Because
you just have to see it. It's like it's what I would imagine an LSD trip would be like through an entire eight comic book run. Like and if you thought that was psychedelic, wait till you read Bill Sienkiewicz's Stray Toasters, which is probably another thing that we would discuss later. It's just his art style and the way that he paints. And it's nutty. It's nutty. I'll yeah.
Oh, it looks sweet. I want to check it out.
There's plenty of action. There's plenty of stuff. But it's definitely for mature readers. You're just like, whoa.
How about the story? Because it's written by Frank Miller. You said.
The story is great. Not to spoil too much.
Yeah.
It concerns like a presidential election.
Mm-hmm.
And we really should kind of do. You should pick it up, and we'll do an actual. This should be something that we do an actual episode on.
Okay, cool. All right. Well, shall I move on to my first pick?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. So since you're on the Marvel run, for me, I read recently Marvels, which I've been wanting to pick up for the longest time, just because of the Alex Ross artwork.
Mm-hmm.
So it is. So for a lot of people, this is, in my opinion, a great jumping on point as an introduction to the Marvel universe. Now, you might argue that you really should know a little bit more about some of the individual characters, or the let's say the Golden Age characters, to get an understanding of what the story is about. But I don't think so personally. I think it's written in such a way that um, Kurt Busiek and Alex Ross present a very accessible story that's very much not about the superheroes, but about how they affect the average Joe. Basically, people in just everyone living in this world, normal people like you and me. So it has. You mentioned with Elektra, it's got a very painterly look. So Alex Ross very much has a very almost photorealistic, painted sort of aesthetic to his artwork. I'm assuming it's. I mean, I've read Kingdom Come as well, and I think it's just indicative of his style. I think it's he draws in a way whereby you can tell that he has, for example, um, he has photo references,
Mm-hmm.
um, and actors or people who he basically models the characters after. So actors and actresses he models the characters after. So yeah, the art is, for someone who's new to Alex Ross, and I was before I read this, it is a little bit of an eye opener in terms of how incredible his art is, and yeah, it made me an instant fan basically. And the story as well, it's written from the perspective of a photojournalist, and how he basically, through several generations or several decades, basically, um, he journals the rise, the fall, the changing landscape of the superhero um, status quo. So basically, he follows how these characters first emerge, and then how they affect general society, and what that means in terms of the idea, the identity of a superhero or a supervillain. What does it mean? What do they carry with all of this power in terms of their impact on society? And it's a really interesting character study, not not just for superheroes, but how they impact people and society in general, what that means to the world at large. And it's a fascinating read. I loved it. It's very accessible, in my opinion, and it gave me a lot of insight into some of the characters and their motivations that I previously was not really familiar with. And then again, I mean, the art is just phenomenal. The writing is great, and it's a very, very well written story. And I will absolutely come back to this and reread it when I get a chance, sometime in the future, I think, because I read it pretty recently. But absolutely, one of my top reads of the year, actually. So I loved this, which I can't say the same for Kingdom Come, which again has Alex Ross's artwork, and I think Marvel's, correct me if I'm wrong, was sort of um, a response to Kingdom Come. Is that right?
I'm not sure what the impetus was to do it. I just know that Marvels came after. It probably was
Yeah.
like, oh wow, Kingdom Come sold
Yeah.
Kingdom Come sold so well that Marvel
Yeah.
wanted to do it as well, and
Yeah.
so they tapped Alex Ross to do it.
Yeah.
Of course, I have both. I have the original runs of both,
Yeah.
and enjoyed both stories. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah. If you
It's a beautiful book. Yeah.
there's another one I'm kind of forgetting the name of it that was done a few years after Marvels, which is kind of like the exact opposite of it.
Yeah.
Um, in a by a different, um, it might have been a different creative team, but it was kind of like a what if version, but like everything turned out wrong. Um, and it's disturbing to say the least. But to stay in the same vein, like Marvels really is a good read, and
Mm.
if anybody has a chance to pick it up, they should.
Yeah. And as I said, both. I mean, Kurt Busiek, his writing is it's so nostalgic, and it just sort of it feels like a timeless story. And and again, like I mean, look at this double spread here. Well, actually, it's not a double spread, but it looks the art is just phenomenal. Alex Ross just knocked it out of the park with this, and
Yeah, I think
yeah,
that's actually really very much a homage to people who read the original, and runs of those in the '60s. Like
okay,
essentially, if you were a baby boomer collecting comics in the '60s, that's a homage because it's like all of those moments
mm,
and the characterizations are faithful to
yeah.
when Marvel Comics had its silver age with with Stan Lee and Jack Kirby and that creative team.
So, is this considered the Silver Age in the Marvel timeline?
I would think so. I would think so.
Okay.
Like the Silver Age is basically like um when comics kind of came out again in this, like the Marvel, kind of like that Marvel ethos. The golden age is when comic books were aplenty, like back when DC was in its heyday.
Okay.
Like
Cool.
in the world wars, essentially.
Mhm. Yeah.
From my
Yes.
understanding.
Well, I mean, as I said, what I loved about it most was the fact that it's written from the perspective of uh, just a reporter. You know, it's not none of the superheroes or villains get any kind of uh, particular characterization in the sense that they're never the focus. The focus is just everyday people, and I thought that was a really novel idea. And to be honest, I've never read anything like it, so maybe there are comparisons today, but I'm pretty sure it was groundbreaking at the time when it came out, and as I said, to me, it was an effortless read. As somebody who's fairly new to the Marvel universe, it just felt like, oh, I really understand what's going on here, and I completely got sucked up into the story, and I read it. I think I read it in 2 nights. I loved it.
Yeah, yeah. I
Absolutely
mean,
recommend it.
it takes you into essentially what the core of the Marvel characters are, like what the Marvel heroes ethos is. It's kind of funny that you opened right onto like a Spider-Man page. Like when you were showing the artwork, because even
Yeah.
then that instance you're just like, okay, yeah, that shows a quintessential Peter Parker as we would like to know him, you know.
Yeah, yeah, and it's just as I said, it's a very human story. That's what I love about it. It feels the fact that it follows this character who has absolutely no powers of his own and is making a living documenting the lives of these superheroes is it's just really original. It really popped in terms of just an innovative way of telling a superhero story. So yeah, that's my
Actually,
pick.
as a little side note before we get to the next pick,
Mm-hmm.
it's like if you see the panels in some of Marvel's, like I think especially when the main character is interacting with Spider-Man, you will actually see it as a homage to the original panels of those Spider-Man run, because he's going to be in that actual run. Like he's in the original comic. They just kind of go like, "Oh, that's the bystander that was there, but he's actually there. I mean, it's a meta thing when it's a homage to fans when they kind of go, oh, that's the really familiar one with Spider-Man in it, and like in the background is actually the the protagonist to this story. But if you ever pick up the original Spider-Man with that panel in it or those events in it, you'll kind of see like, hey, he's actually in it. It's kind of funny.
Nice, nice. Yeah, so that's my pick, my first pick anyway. So what's your next one?
Well, speaking of Mobius, my next pick is the Silver Surfer.
Oh, okay.
Made by Mobius.
Dude, I'm so glad you brought this up. I want this big time. So yeah, tell me about it.
So this is the original, and I remember getting this. This is the original print. These are the original prints of when Marvel just tapped Mobius to kind of say like, hey, kid, you're famous in France. How about doing like a story for us, using our characters? And he just popped this out. Here's issue 2. There's only 2 issues of it.
Oh, is it that short? I didn't realize.
They have it in a collected volume, but it's it's actually very very short as a story, and I mean, this is printed on regular newsprint, regular paper. Doesn't have like the recolorization, of anything. This is just what you would get on a newsstand. I got this particular issue at the corner 7-Eleven, close to our condo back then. I remember that. No way.
When was that? Well, what year was that? Do you remember?
I'd say in the early 90s or late 80s. I can't remember exactly when this came out. And then this one I don't know where I got it. I might have gotten it from a comic book store. Yeah. But it essentially kind of tells you what my habit was. I was wherever there were comics, I would just pick them up if I could. Yeah, I knew everywhere where I grew up, I knew where they sold comics, and I would pick them up when I could. And I also knew that if I was looking for a particular issue, I would go to just a different place to try to get it. Because those are the times when you would just be like, oh, that comic is so popular, I can't get it. And I'd have to try to kind of source out where to get it.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking pre-internet here, but who wrote it then?
It was, let's see, I think it was Mobius himself. Everything is pretty much by Mobius here.
Wow.
I think, but I can double check that because I want to give credit where credit is due. Again, look at the...
Let's see some of those panels, because Mobius, dude, I'm such a big fan of anything he's put out, and the fact that he did Silver Surfer is just, I mean, what an inspired choice, right? He's like a perfect fit.
Yeah, the story is by Stan Lee. And the art is by Mobius.
Okay, cool. Nice.
All right, and then
would you say is it typical Mobius artwork, or would you say it's kind of slightly different?
Oh, it's very Mobius. Check that out.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Check that out.
Oh man, that's beautiful. I need this. In my life.
It's lovely, and I think they've done it in a collected version.
Yeah,
and it's been. There's something about reading comic books in their original condition. When the paper starts to kind of change color, and it's like watching TV on an old Trinitron, which is
I've never heard that analogy before, but that's cool. I like it.
Yep,
nice.
And that's
so what? I mean, Tell me something about the story though, without spoiling anything. Is it an origin tale? Is it sort of a
It's just
continuation?
it's probably not part of canon of Marvel canon. It's just one of those things where Stan Lee writes a story about the Silver Surfer, and of course, it's always going to be tied to Galactus. I cannot, for the life of me, tell you the exact details of the story. I just know that it has to end in 2 issues, so it can't be that much.
Okay. Right. Well, perhaps we can do that. Use that one for a future episode because it's on my radar, definitely.
Yeah, we could probably do like a Mobius episode because the like just we could talk about the Silver Surfer all day. The just this particular comic, I think that would be
Well,
okay.
well, here's the thing, mate. I can't talk about the Silver Surfer because I've never read a Silver Surfer comic. So, for me, I'm looking for a starting point, jumping on point book, and I mean the run that you showed me is one that I would really want to read just because it's Mobius on the art, but um, I'm looking for the ideal jumping on point. So
Well, you
maybe
could
that.
do that, or I think there's a Silver Surfer run back a while ago in the '80s too, which I picked up, which is Marshall Rogers and Steve Englehart. I think.
Okay.
Um, we could talk about that later, but that's also something you could latch onto because that ran on for quite a few issues, and it
Yeah.
was one of those things wherein those creators were responsible for a really good run of Batman in the '70s, and then
Yeah.
Marvel tapped them to do Silver Surfer in the '80s. So
Nice.
if you wanted to do an actual comic run of issues,
Hmm.
that Silver Surfer series is a little more than 2 issues, and will get you more into like what the Silver Surfer, the Silver Surfer ethos.
Nice. Okay, good pick. All
Hmm.
right. So my next pick is actually a manga, and it is Witch Hat Atelier. Which is written and drawn by Kamone Shirahama, and
Mm.
she is very famous in the Marvel DC um, circles as someone who's done a lot of cover art for quite a few runs, which I won't list through. But yeah, so the reason why I picked this one is very much like Marvel's um, for the art. Her art is just looking at this front cover
Hmm.
is stunning. Like the art in this book is, I mean, just to show you just some very just random any page you pick up is just a work of art.
Hmm.
Just phenomenal artwork. She is very much known for having a very very distinct style. It's a very it's a dreamlike technique that she uses. There's just so much ridiculous detail, and you think I was always thinking to myself as I went through this volume, as I went through this book, there's no way she can keep that up. There's no way this is sustainable in terms of the amount of time and detail that she must put into every panel. But it is consistent. The entire book is as amazing as this front cover in terms of the artwork. The storytelling as well is great. It's a really magical sort of think of it of a sort of Harry Potter um, take on the whole witch a school for witchcraft, um, but at the same time there's more of an emphasis on a community of witches and wizards and what they mean in the realm that they inhabit. So it's got some great world building, really nice characterizations. Coco here is the main character, and she's really likable, and it's a very whimsical story. It's one of these stories that I read just to, I suppose, escape. It's it's high fantasy. It's as I said, it's beautifully illustrated and a really well written story. I'm really looking forward to what's in store for the rest of the series.
Mhm.
So yeah, this is by Kodansha, and I
Oh, I'm
mean,
gonna have to try to pick that up.
yeah,
Because
it's
I've never heard of it.
I wholeheartedly recommend it. Probably one of the best manga pickups of the year for me. So that's my
Nice.
that's my pickup for Witch Hat Atelier. What's your next one?
My next one is going to be something I don't have because I have it in my. I don't have it here where I'm visiting, but I have it at my house, and it's and we'll just put a screenshot of it up. Um, and it's called Batman Court of Owls.
I've heard
Um,
of this. Yeah.
and it's something that I have in a hardcover collection, and it's just volume one, so I don't have the second volume. Right? I don't know how many volumes there are, but I do want to pick up the second volume soon. And I look. Here's kind of like
Oh yeah. Yeah.
a bit of a representation there, but
Hmm.
it's by Scott Snyder, who wrote it, and Greg Capullo, who's the artist. And the story is basically um, Batman comes across this what seems like a syndicate of people who are secretly running Gotham City, and it's kind of like he at first he refuses to acknowledge that there could be anything like that because it's his city and everything that goes into his city he knows about. So it's something that kind of got under his radar and is now kind of menacing him and the people around him. Um, and the story itself is really really cool. It kind of goes into how Batman is quite vulnerable to something like this, and also into his family history, which I'm always fascinated by, like how, and if you watch the movies and things like that, that Bruce Wayne's family is very philanthropic, and it has a lot to do with the history of Gotham City. So when you kind of go into it, the main draw of it is to kind of see how Gotham City was built. There's lots of different stories about this, about Gotham's past and how it's kind of like a cursed city in a way. There's other things that I could talk about here from earlier runs of Batman, but it's it's fascinating because Batman is, of course, a larger than life character, but so is Gotham City, and you cannot separate Batman from Gotham City, right?
Hmm. Okay. How long is that run? Because
Oh, I
I.
don't know. I was going
Hmm.
through the book, and that was maybe around 7 or 8 issues, the first volume. I'm
Hmm.
guessing, or maybe
I
it's yeah.
I say that because I think recently I follow Omar's channel, Mint Condition, and I think he did a recent overview of a new reprint of the omnibus editions. So it looked pretty big to me, but again,
Oh, okay.
is it the kind of story where again is it accessible to new readers of sort of the Batman lore?
There's got to be some knowledge of Batman lore there, a little bit.
Okay.
Although it is, I'm pretty sure people could pick it up and just have it as a standalone.
What if you've
Um,
like read The Dark Knight Returns and maybe some of
Not
maybe
really. I wouldn't go into it from there.
okay.
I'd have to have a couple of starter issues on Batman's surrounding cast because it also concerns them. It also concerns like the people around him, the other superheroes of Gotham.
Okay. Okay, interesting. Cool. Anything else you want to say about that one?
No. Sorry that I don't actually have it with me,
Hmm.
but take my word, I have the first hardcover volume, and I'm looking for the second volume when I can.
Is it just 2 volumes then? that completes the story?
I really don't know.
Mm,
But that's the fun part about it. Is
yeah,
it's actually a real pickup wherein it was basically given to me by my brother.
yeah,
And and he was like, "Yeah, this is good." And I was like, "Okay, I'll my brother reads comic books
yeah,
just like I do. So I was like, "Yeah, I'll give it a try." And it's great.
yeah. I've got to say, as an aside, it's cool to have a family member who is into sort of a similar hobby, or like especially into reading comics. I don't know anybody in my general immediate circle, family or otherwise, who's into this hobby. So
Oh, see, the thing
it's
is
kind of cool.
my brother and I grew up reading comic books. That's what we did. Like
Yeah,
we that's how we passed our time. And
mm,
him being my younger brother, he would just tag along to the places where we would buy comic books, of
yeah,
course. And so he got into the hobby with me.
mm,
Um and but the thing is I think he would like me to be more into it now.
yeah,
It's just that I have so many different responsibilities.
mm,
Uh
yeah. Fair enough.
yeah.
I mean, so like I have my two brothers and my sister. Neither of them are into comics, and I grew up reading comics. Um, I was reading since the age of I want to say 6 was probably when I got my first comic, and it was a Transformers comic. I don't know which run it was, but I distinctly remember my dad getting me that, and me just thinking I love I love comic books. So it's funny how no one else in the house in our family kind of jumped on that. My youngest brother, reads manga here and there, but I mean he doesn't collect or read in any sort of any I would say dedicated way. It's just literally the odd thing once every couple of years. Anyway, I
Okay.
digress.
No
On
worries.
to my next pick, if that's okay.
Mhm.
And I'm going to bring up something that is very different, very, very different. And that is People of the Indus, which is,
Wow.
yeah, right. I bet you
That's
didn't expect that.
awesome.
Yeah, so this is by, I don't want to butcher his name, Nikhil Gulati, and he is the artist and the writer. And
Mhm.
then Jonathan Mark Kenya, who
Mhm.
is a contributor, but he is an academic from, I believe, oh God, I can't remember. I think he's from. He's a professor at Michigan University, or well, a university in the US, and this. So what this is an overview of the ancient civilization of the Indus people. So the Indus people, for anyone who doesn't know, were an ancient civilization about 3,200 BCE that existed in India, northwestern India, where sort of that where the border between Pakistan and India currently exists, and so it's very much a historical comic book about the rise and the eventual fall of this civilization. So um, it's illustrated beautifully. So Nikhil Gulati, I believe he's a historian. He's Indian, and this whole
No, it
publication,
looks nice.
it is very well drawn, and it's really insightful stuff. It gives you an entire rundown of the history of these people, and the great thing about it is that it's probably the most unlikely civilization to base a book on. Because I mean a comic book on, because and it's written in a very sort of matter of fact way, in that it's almost like he's taken us on a whistle stop tour of this deep, complex history of these
Mhm.
people, and how they were very much advanced for their time, and had technology that would only much, much later during the Roman Empire, which was several hundred years later, um, would become something that we would take on board in the Western world, like drainage systems that were way beyond their time. So it's really interesting. It's really informative. It was extremely educational for me, and it's
Mhm.
drawn really well. There's a lot of character to the art, the paneling, and it's just a really unique book, and
Mhm.
it's one that I got to shout out off my shelves. He's a YouTuber who reviews comic books. He's from Wales, so we need more Welsh comic book YouTubers. And because I grew up in Wales, so and yeah, I'll put his link in the show notes below to his channel. But he introduced me to this book, and I'm so glad he did, because I've never seen anyone talk about this book, and it's published by Penguin. There was Penguin. In fact, I think it's Penguin India. It's printed in India as well. So great to see this kind of these kind of historical comic book representations of really interesting topics, and I'm all
Yeah.
for it.
No, that's great. I mean, just to kind of go into different genres of comic books is a great thing, because I think for here in America, the thinking is still is, oh, comic books, it's all superheroes, and
Yeah,
um, that's what, and people don't really treat it seriously still, as much as they should. But like comics of different countries, especially if you go to like Europe or Asia or even like East Asia, there's
mm.
different there's there's different genres that are very popular because
Oh yeah.
different people have different interests.
Yeah, I mean, European comics cover such a huge gamut of topics and places where where they're based. And I got to say, comics are I'm gonna, when I get to my last pick, I'll talk about it in more detail. But comics can be a hugely powerful medium um, to not just tell fictional stories, but to also educate. There's such it's such a perfect marriage of the visual and prose to 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 bring about this fascinating combination of storytelling that can also be based on literal works and literal life. And it's just, this particular book really caught my attention because I love ancient civilizations. My favorite being ancient Egypt, and I love reading about not just comics but about history. And this was like, as a comic book fan, this was just such a breath of fresh air. So that's my pick. What's your next one?
Nice. Okay, so going into that, it's kind of like mine is kind of a bit of a mishmash, and it's a reprise of what we did in episode one, a little
Oh,
bit.
nice. Okay.
So my next pick is Batman: The Dark Knight Returns,
Oh,
but in Japanese.
oh wow. Okay, that's
Yeah, so I
interesting.
picked this up when I lived in Japan, and to help me study Japanese. And this has the entire run. Um, but if you look, everything's in Japanese except for the sound effects, which
That's
that
that's interesting. So, I mean, presumably you'd need some basic level uh, of English to get the sound effects right.
oh yeah. I mean, that's just, I think, a really great, the way that they did it. It's really fun. I mean, it's basically just a translation of the Dark Knight Returns.
Yeah,
Um,
that's
Here,
so
let me see. Is
unique.
there anything new?
I
There's
really,
lots of end stuff here too, which might be in the actual collected version of the English version, which I've never seen. Um,
um, not from well, I don't have I don't have the version you have in English, but I've not seen. some of the extras, or I can't remember them, to be honest. I didn't expect you to bring this out. That's definitely caught me off guard.
Yeah, this is. I mean,
So
I bought this
why
as
did you pick this one?
well, because it was cheap. You could get these. I got this at a Japanese used bookstore called Book Off, which
Oh
I
yeah, I
hope
know
is still
Book Off.
around. I love
Yeah,
Book
no, it
Off.
is. It's live and kicking. Yeah.
Um, and I mean, it has here a cost of 2,400 yen, but I definitely did not pick it up for 2,400 yen. It probably was on sale for like maybe less than 1,000 yen,
Mm. Well,
which
Book
is
Off is
about
secondhand books anyway, so
yeah. So it's a
presumably.
secondhand book, and I just said like I could use a second copy of The Dark Knight Returns, even if it is in Japanese. And Lord knows my Japanese is not as good as a lot of the stuff that is in here. But if I ever pick my study back up, I have something that will look. It's got like the rough sketches
Oh, nice.
to what they were
Well,
gonna do. It
yeah.
would be really interesting for me to just want to delve into things after picking up my Japanese study. So there you
Oh,
go.
I love that. Funny you should bring up the Dark Knight Returns because the Japanese edition, because you reminded me of my first trip to Japan many years ago, and I was in Tokyo, and I walked into a comic book store. I didn't go looking for it. I just found it in a little alleyway. I believe it was in Shibuya, but I might be wrong there. And they had a copy of Spider-Man Blue, um, Jeff Loeb and Tim Sell, and I remember picking it up and thinking, it's probably a Japanese version. So I couldn't at the time. I couldn't read any Japanese, and my Japanese now is so rudimentary that it's just I can read some hiragana. That's about it. So, but anyway, luckily that book was in English, and I picked it up, and it was one of my first introductions to the Jeff Loeb Tim Sell team, and I was a big fan forevermore. But it just you picking up the Japanese copy just reminded me of that story of how
Oh,
I just blind sort of like completely blindly walked into this comic book store and thought, hey, there are English comic books in Japan, and I had
which
no
is
idea.
great, which is
Yeah,
awesome.
well, because most of it was in English in the shop, and I
Right,
couldn't believe it.
right. Well, that just shows you like the love that people have for this medium.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
I wish it was comic books really exploded in the United States, Like the United States was the I think the country that really revolutionized like the manufacture of comics and
yeah.
putting comics out to the masses. And it's just not as appreciated as a lot of other countries, and I wish that
Mm,
would be different.
yeah. It's a crying shame, really, because as you say, there's a lot of stigma attached to comics, and how, as I showed you in my previous pickup, there are genres where, again, you wouldn't normally identify with it from the comics medium, but comics are not just about superheroes. It's an actual medium, and I think we need to take it as seriously as any other form of literature or entertainment. It is a work. It's a form of art, and
Well, it's not only a form of art; it's a form of art that everybody understands,
mm,
especially children. And in a way, I would kind of like to think this. Um, there's a saying in Catholic and Christian circles that you will not that you can't know the kingdom of God unless you are as a child. Um, and the thing is, comic books are one of those things that make you be a child again.
mm,
It's
yeah,
something very powerful, and it's something that you know modern society just doesn't understand that you don't have to be like you could be mature and like things that are for adults, but then
yeah,
when something so universal kind of is loved, that's the way to somebody's heart more so. That's the way into, in one sense, the kingdom of God, or knowing better.
Yeah, it is a very powerful medium. So no argument from me there. Cool. I like that one. Last question about it though. Did you manage to read most of it?
In Japanese,
Yeah.
I'd confess to just kind of going through the first issue and going like, dang, this is, I need to beef up my Japanese.
Is it mainly hiragana or is there a lot of kanji?
Oh no, there's kanji too. Like this
Okay.
is meant for people. It doesn't have the furigana to help you either.
Right. Okay.
So you're gonna have to be well versed. I'd say you'd have to be like second level Japanese proficiency to at least read this.
Okay. Cool. All right. Well, that's me out of that. But yeah,
No worries.
it's nice. It's nice that you brought that one up. And shout out to Book Off. I haven't been to one in years, but yeah, I do. I love that chain of stores. I have to say, mainly
Well,
for
we'll
video
have
games, to be honest.
if
But
if everything aligns, Cam, we will do an episode in Japan.
oh yeah, no, that we should do that. Yeah. By the way, Book Off's in the US as well, though, right? In some states.
Oh, I didn't know that. If they are, I did not know that.
I think there is. In fact, I do know for a fact there's one in Hawaii, but I guess
I could see that.
yeah, there's a big Japanese community there. So, but whether or not that's relevant, I don't know.
We will have to do like like if the stars align, we'll just have to do an episode going into Book Off
in Japan. Yeah,
yeah.
Totally. All right, that was a nice one. So my next one is another manga, and this one is Dandadan, story and art by Yukinobu Tatsu, and it is this is actually the 5th volume, but it's there's currently it goes only up to volume 5 in English, but it's I think there's 10 volumes in Japan currently. Published by Shonen Jump and Viz, and oh man, let me just get into this. This is one of the most fun books I have ever read, ever, and I'm talking 25 plus years of reading manga. Okay, not comics, but reading manga, and this is one of the best, most fun stories I've ever read. It comes at the highest recommendation from me and the fact that this was written and the artwork done by the same person is just, it blows my mind because Tatsu Sensei is so ridiculously talented. I got to show you some of the artwork because I can talk about it and you won't really know what I'm on about here, but it's just so kinetic, so detailed, so the characters are so expressive and so lovable, and so yeah, that's another example there. So it's about two characters, Momo, who is she's the girl, one of the main protagonists, and then you have this other kid called Okran. Okran, who is basically, his first name's Ken, and basically what happens is these two people. These are two side characters. So one of them believes in aliens, and the other one believes in the supernatural, so ghosts and things like that. And in order to prove or disprove each other's beliefs, they dare each other to go to a particular spot in their city to witness one of these phenomena. And what happens is, it turns out that both of them exist. So what follows is a bunch of ridiculous, zany adventures between the two, and it's also a romance tale. So there's a romance running through it, which is, I don't normally read romance. I'm not into shoujo or anything like that. But my goodness, is this entertaining? Like, It is not a simple will they, won't they. It is literally just the most ridiculous situations, the most funny villains, and also quite scary imagery. There's also a lot of horror in this, which is why it's recommended for mature audiences, which you don't normally see in a Shonen Jump series. But this has basically everything. It has everything you would ever want from a manga. It has great characters, absolutely fabulous art, and it's just so well written in terms of the characterization. So it just has everything I've ever wanted from a manga. I sound like a broken record there, but it is also, if you're a fan of horror, there's so much of it here, and it's really quite, some of it is quite creepy actually, and I'm not easily affected by horror in any form, whether it be film or books. But this book entertained the hell out of me. By the fifth volume, I'm an all-time fan now. This cannot come more highly recommended enough from me, and I'm going to be carrying on with the series. But it's one that I would love to revisit, because it's just pure escapism. It's so much fun, and I can see why people wanted it to be translated, and it was such a big deal when it came out earlier this year. So yeah, I mean, it's a pick from this year, and I love it. I highly recommend it.
Okay, well, I'm familiar with it. I follow it as well. So
You do?
Dandadan is Dandadan is
Man,
on
you
my
should have
reading
said
list.
something.
But I wanted you to go ahead with the exposition because the viewers won't know what it is. But I totally
think they do.
agree. It's something. It's the only thing that I follow that's recent. It's the only thing manga that I follow that's recent.
Bro.
And
I'm so happy.
it is a kick. It is a kick. I just kind of came across it and I was like, what is this? So yeah, Don Da Don is definitely on my radar. It's a fun read. I try to keep up with it. And
What do you like about it? Because I didn't actually realize you'd read it as well.
Just the fact that it's just nonsense in a way that in a way that nonsense is not nonsense in a way, not it's nonsense the way that everything is juxtaposed. You're just like, what? So you've got ghosts and aliens and alternate, it kind of seems like not alternate realities, but like gateways to other worlds.
Yeah.
And
It's
Japanese
so
supernatural.
It's completely bonkers, and I just love its commitment to that level of absurdity.
It's very slapstick. It's kind of like Japanese slapstick put into comic book form. It's nutty. It's great.
I love the characters. There's a lot of heart in that story as well, which is what kept me reading. But that's my pick. So what's your last one?
Okay, so this last one, and this was, none of these came in any apparent order, right? Like none of the picks that I did came in any apparent order, but when I was looking through, there were some things that we were talking about recently I have to talk about this. I have to talk about this because we talked about it recently, not on an episode. But check this out. Back in the 90s, back when there were lots of gimmicks to sell comic books, they came out with a whole bunch of different ways to collect. And so here I have X-Men #1 by Jim Lee.
Oh my god.
And Chris Claremont. Wow. X-Men #1, the variant cover, and then X-Men #1 that connects to it. And again, X-Men #1 that connects to it. And X-Men #1, the end of that entire panel of covers. I was there when this came out, and they had 5 different covers in the comic book shop that you could collect. All of them are the same exact issue, X-Men #1. And I got them all, including the deluxe version, which I have in a backing board. And this one has a gatefold cover which opens up.
Oh wow!
And so this
Would you ever consider getting that slabbed?
No.
Okay.
This stuff I read it. I don't want to put it into. I mean, this is stuff that I would read again, just to kind of see. Just like I told you before, I want to look into the pages as they kind of age. And here, I'll even just take this one out of this. See, here's the complete cover.
Oh, nice.
And the other, and this one also pops out here.
That's so cool. So,
this
what do you mean by issue #1 of a particular run, or the very beginnings of X-Men? I don't.
No, this is the. Jim Lee had done a lot of stuff with Chris Claremont on the original X-Men, Uncanny X-Men, right? And that was kind of like when Jim Lee's star was on the rise. He was tapped to do X-Men in the Uncanny X-Men, and he was so popular that they decided to make a book just that he does with Chris Claremont, but it's different from Uncanny X-Men because it's just X-Men, and it was a #1, right? Uncanny X-Men had by then gone into the hundreds already. And this is, of course, not the first time that Jim Lee did X-Men. He's got other issues that I have lying around where he did earlier issues of X-Men, but he was a really, really popular artist on X-Men that they decided to do this. And this is, I think we were talking, like, this book or this iteration of X-Men is what the 90s X-Men series was based on.
You mean the TV series, or are you
That's
talking
right.
about the? Oh, okay, yeah. Cool.
The original cartoon drama TV series on Fox or Fox Kids, I think.
That's what I grew up with. Yeah.
Yeah, and so this was kind of like that team. So I thought I thought it was really great that it was in that box, waiting for me to rediscover it again. And I don't know how many issues Jim Lee did with Chris Claremont on X-Men. I think they went past 12 issues, which is a pretty good run. Essentially, it's great. It's quintessential mutant save the world kind of superhero comics. Going back to that.
Yeah, I mean, I have the only X-Men run I have is the God Loves, Man Kills by Chris Claremont as well, which is very much standalone. So I've got a collected edition, but I do actually want to look into more X-Men material, and I think the one that I'm going to wait for, which is next year, is the Uncanny run by Rick Remender, which I've heard nothing but great things about. So it's out of print currently, but it's coming back into print next summer, I think. So I'm happy to wait for that reissue, and I'll pick it up then.
Okay, sure. Yeah. That's yeah. Well, I just thought that was something that related to something that you had said that I was like, yeah, that's something that's going to have to go into the pickups.
That's cool. Yeah, I love it. I especially like the fact that you got all of the first issues to make that spread. That's really cool.
Yeah, well, back then when a comic book cost $1.50,
yeah,
you know, and you had a nice allowance, you could go
You go
hog
nuts.
wild with it,
Yeah.
But nowadays, whoa, there's no way.
Yeah, fair play. In the UK, I mean, my parents generally bought me comics, so I never really paid attention to the price. But I'm talking about in the 80s, they were less than £1, a couple of pence an issue.
Yeah.
So it was pretty easy. Whenever my mum or dad would go out shopping or something, I'd usually get an issue of something, so as a little thank you for behaving myself. So,
Oh, I wish
um,
that was still around here in the US. Maybe it's
yeah.
still slightly around in the UK,
Well,
depending on where you could
well,
get
it
comics.
is. It is. I mean, single issues are still around. It's just, I think when you go to stores, you get a far more limited range of single issues. A lot of it is now collected omnis, which is how I read comics these days. I mean, all my books are collected editions. I don't buy singles anymore, and I very rarely did as a young adult either. So anyway, that's neither here nor there. That's just the I think that's just the direction we're heading in, and especially with digital stuff as well. I think more people are reading digitally these days. So as
Yeah,
somebody who's very much dedicated to the physical format for my comics, I hope I hope the industry keeps people like myself and many others happy in that respect.
yeah,
Anyway, I digress. Shall I move on to my last pick?
yeah. Go ahead.
All right, so here's another one. It's a controversial pick, and it is based on a very delicate subject at the moment, and that is Palestine by
Mm,
Joe Sacco. So, for anyone who's not aware, Joe Sacco is a journalist, an American journalist who has written a few books based on his travels and his coverage of certain countries. He's gone to Bolivia, I believe, in one of his earlier books. But this one really caught my eye, not necessarily because of what's going on today in the Middle East, but mainly because there is I'm going to shout out a comic store in London that I very much love. I'll put the link to their shop in the show notes, and that is Gosh Comics. They're based in central London, and on a visit to hang out with a friend of mine, we went in, and I saw this book. I'd never heard of it. I leafed through it, and I thought, oh wow, that I mean, a book, a comic book on Palestine, and the sort of it touches on lots of things, but I didn't buy it there. So I put it down, and I thought, that's maybe, I took a picture of it, and I thought, I'll think about that one, maybe learn a little bit more about it. Um, but since everything that took place over the last couple of months, it came unsurprisingly back into my mind, and I thought, remember that book Palestine by Joe Sacco? I think now's the time to read it, because I have to say, I don't know enough. Aside from what I see in the news and what I read from the papers, which is not necessarily always a fair and um, I want to say comprehensive view of what's actually happening. I thought I'd like to educate myself a bit more on what's happening and pick up this book, and I'm so glad I did. This is single-handedly one of the most important books I've read, because again, it is very much like the people of the Indus. It is a comic book that opened my eyes to a perspective that I was very much ignorant to. And when I say ignorant to, yes, I am fully aware of the struggles of the Palestinian people and the Israeli people, because obviously any conflict, there are always going to be multiple angles to the suffering of everyday people, which unfortunately is what has happened. But there's a panel here at the end. I'm not going to find it, but and one of the characters, one of the people who is Israeli, she says to Joe, she says, well, why don't you write more about our side of the story? Because Joe Sacco, he's obviously not Palestinian, he's an American, and he he tries to put across a balanced view of what he sees. It's very much a first person experience of his time in Gaza, on the Gaza Strip, and in various parts of Palestine. And the character says, "Why don't you show our side of the story?" And his response to that is so poignant and so powerful. In that he says, well, that's all I ever see. I only ever see as an American, I only ever see one side of that story. I only ever see Israel's side of this conflict. I don't really know anything about the Palestinian side of the story, and that's what this is. And this book is a response to that, and it is so well put together. The artwork is very heavily stylized. It's very. It reminds me of the kind of political cartoons that sort of grace and still do in sort of Time magazine and various newspapers in the UK, and you get a lot of sort of cartoons for politics. Caricatures of politicians and whatnot, and it kind of feels a little bit like that in terms of the style. It's very exaggerated, but it's also hugely, hugely powerful and difficult to read, because this very, very expertly shows you just how difficult things are for the Palestinian people. I'm talking about everyday Palestinians. I'm not talking about political figures or Hamas or anything, any particular factions. It's more about the everyday person, in the same way that I was talking about Marvels. It's a story about people overcoming huge adversity to just get on with life. And it's one of the most difficult books I've ever had to read, because some of it is so dark and so unforgiving that I had to question myself in terms of, why would anybody treat another human being like that? This is
right.
It's a very difficult book to articulate without having read it. So if you have any interest in what this was, in what goes on beyond those walls, to everyday people, and the fact that right now, I believe, and again, this is not me taking any side, because at the end of the day, in my opinion, all life is sacred, and in any conflict, unfortunately, it's always civilians who are the true casualties. And in this case, just speaking from the perspective of this book, over 20,000 Palestinian civilians have died so far, which is unthinkable in this post World War II age. This age where I would hope humanity would understand the value of life. But this book really gives you an understanding of some of the political tensions that brought about the atrocities that were committed by both sides of this conflict. And it is very, very informative. It is educational. It is harrowing. It is very emotional. There were times where I had to put it down. I thought, this is so messed up. I can't read anymore. I want to just read a superhero comic and just have a palate cleanser. It's very difficult to read. But my goodness, is it an important read? It might go down. I know we're not doing a best of the year, but if I had to choose a book that moved me the most this year, it would be Palestine by Joe Sacco, and I highly recommend it as a book that not just gives a very, very important message in terms of the horrors of war and the implications of dehumanizing a population
Hmm.
to the point where violence appears to be an everyday facet of life, and that to me is very difficult to accept. But this book really, really, uh, uh, really powerfully pushes forward that idea that people, you know, people deserve to be treated with respect, and unfortunately, that doesn't always happen. And this is um, a really great book in its entirety, from the art, the writing. It's very funny in places. There's a lot of black humor in it, but my goodness, it's a great book. So it comes with my highest recommendation, and to be honest, my favorite read of the year. Um, that's all I have to say about it, really.
Wow, what a great choice! That's a great choice. I haven't heard anything about it, but you're right in the sense that things here, the way that media portrays that conflict has pretty much been very, very one-sided. Although there there's a lot of balance that has been kind of been put on it the last maybe 10 or 15 years. Um, I don't want to get into like the way that there's some reads that I have read um, that kind of mirror that, but I don't want to I don't want to get into that now.
Mm,
There's some experiences that I've had, like teaching English on the Peace Boat, where we visited kind of that area and actually heard from people involved in that conflict.
mm,
Well, ordinary people involved in that conflict and what they had to say about it. So it's I think that's an important thing, an important piece of literature to kind of put forward to everybody and kind of just say like, hey, look, um, if you want to know a little bit more about it, here's something to pick up, and it's something that will actually get you into it. You know,
yeah.
I mean, getting into it, meaning like the subject matter and getting more understanding out of it is what I mean.
Mm,
Um, because comic books will actually really do that. Like sequential art is one of the ways, just like we were talking about earlier, where you just it takes you into that mindset wherein you are more receptive to ideas.
yeah,
And
absolutely.
yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say. I think those are great pickups that we've just shown. But um, yeah, yeah. How about we wrap it up?
Yep, absolutely. So it's been a great year for comics, and we're going to carry on in the new year. So until then, I would just like to say that I'm glad we started this channel, and I'm having a lot of fun. So I hope you are too, Jake. And
Thanks, Cam. Yeah, I am. I am having a lot of fun, kind of rediscovering my old passions in a way.
yeah,
And it's good to kind of exchange these ideas with you, and to kind of exchange these ideas with our audience.
yeah.
Hopefully, hopefully people will get something really meaningful out of it.
Yeah, I would hope so. And if not, well, we're having fun anyway. So
Yeah, that's right.
that's the main point. So yeah, I just want to say to anybody watching, have a great rest of your Christmas. Stay healthy and safe, and I wish the very best for all of you. And we'll be back in the new year with more reviews and views for all things comics.
Yeah, don't
But
forget to like and subscribe.
please
Also,
do. Please do. And until then, have a great holiday, and we will see you soon. So take
happy
care.
holidays.